So, a warm welcome back to the show, Dr. Patrick Hanaway. Welcome, Doc. So
Welcome.
we
Thanks so
are
much.
we are shifting here. This is the beginning of the year of reinvention here at the Evolution of Medicine. We just came from the year of resilience. It was very prescient to advocate for resilience even before COVID showed up on American shores, potentially, I guess. I'm hoping that in this transition we can really get ahead of what's going to be required in 2021. So what are your thoughts on the year that's gone by and 2021 as the year of reinvention?
Well, James, thanks for including me in the new year and thinking about this. We've seen this past year be one where resilience has been needed, and you picked it spot on. And because what we've wanted to do is be able to deal with the stress of life, all the things that are coming at us, and be able to effectively. We've heard many times, how do we make our immune system resilient, so that we can deal with what's out there. And while it is relevant to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it's relevant to life itself. How do we make ourselves resilient so that we can optimize our health and well-being as we go forward? And, as you know, I've had some opportunities to learn about that over the past few years, and, being able to focus on what is it that's going to help me to heal, to become more whole, and how do I do that amongst all the different kinds of things that are out there, and being able to listen. And in that way, now we're taking that resilience, and we're working to reinvent. You said coming into this year, but that is really about invention is like coming upon. It's finding. It's from that Latin word around invent, to encounter, to come upon, to find, and it's about finding again. It's like we've had this spark. We've known that it's there, and so it's like remembering, refinding, re-encountering that which is health and wholeness.
Absolutely. Yes, I mean, it does seem obviously, throughout last year, were in a position talking about some of the resources that arrive in the natural world and resources that are used in functional medicine clinics to be able to create a more resilient body and to have an effective response to COVID. It does seem that the longer that time goes on, that so many of the principles that we've spoken about in functional medicine for years start to ring true. And one of them, just most recently for me, became most obvious was dysbiosis and how the gut is, when the gut is dysfunctioning, the effect of SARS-CoV-2 can be much greater. Now, in the context of reinvention, we live in a world where we have these like fully integrated systems of medicine, like Chinese medicine and others, where healing the gut is primary. And it does seem that perhaps there's some, if we're going to re-find and re-encounter principles, that there may be some good places to start.
We are coming to first principles. And so within functional medicine, we take a food first approach. And that food first approach is one that, in order for that to be effective, your gut has to be in balance. You have to be able to assimilate and digest these nutrients so that you can have the macronutrients and micronutrients that you need to be healthy and well. And so when that point of balance and connection, remember our gut and the food we eat, it's our interface with the environment. It's the closest, most intimate relationship that we have in terms of determining who we are and who we can be. And so when things aren't working in our gut, we have imbalances, we have constipation, diarrhea, we have different symptoms that are going on. A lot of times, as you said, mediated by an imbalance in the gut microbiome. And we see this loss of diversity in the environment, and we see this loss of diversity in the microbiome, and it's not able to function in an optimal way. So how do we bring that back into balance? And as you said, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, others all focus on this as a first principle of what we need to do. And we do see, a subset of patients who get exposed to, SARS-CoV-2, they have gut problems first and foremost. And some of my, long hauler patients, post-COVID patients have ongoing gut gut related symptoms, that are occurring. And so how do we bring balance back to that system in order to be able to promote resilience? And it's through that resilience that we have the opportunity to, find again, to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I thought you'd be a perfect person to kick off this conversation of reinvention is because you do have, sort of, I guess, so many different areas of interest. I know for years the gut microbiome was front and central to your work at Genova Diagnostics. Obviously, being at the Cleveland Clinic and pioneering some of these group delivered models and functional medicine inside systems. And then I know that there's a deep passion and deep experience for you in indigenous medicine as well. And so, there are three sort of incredible points of alignment, I guess. And how do you see those points of alignment coming through into this year of reinvention next year?
Well, I appreciate that, James. And what's interesting to me is like they're really all part of the same thing, right? And so when we talk about connecting to self, each other as community and the natural world, like that's what we're working to do, is to find, well, where's the balance point? And that's what health is about. Being, as I said earlier, becoming more whole. That's what we're striving for. So how we do that in relationship to each other in the natural world, critically important points, so we can learn from the wisdom of elders, who have gone before, who have had difficult times, have dealt with infectious disease, and have been able to bring, themselves and their communities and their cultures forward in a way where they're continuing to learn. I just read a piece by Ed Young in the Atlantic about science, and it's like, will science actually learn from what's gone through this year? They've done some amazing things, but there's some things that didn't go so well. Can we continue to learn? And the beauty to me of science is about curiosity, is about not presuming to know the answer, but continuing to look with curiosity. And that, in fact, is what my experience of the indigenous teachings and elders is that they are continuing to be curious, and they're listening to what works in the world. They're not about ideology, they're about what works. How do we go forward, in this process? So, as I look to reinventing, what's happening, it's really about listening and being curious and saying, oh, that's not working, and this seems to be working. I don't understand this, but I need to learn it more. I need to deepen into it. And that will allow me to be able to, continue to grow and learn.
From that widest possible angle, where do you see are the areas where practitioners in our community and other people that are interested in this reinvention of medicine, where are the areas where they should be most curious?
Well, not to give props to you, but I think that you've hit upon it in terms of looking at community and looking at how do we do this in groups, and how do we work in relationship to each other, and how do we begin promoting the ideas of behavior change. We have some ideas of what are the best foods to eat, what are the ways to be able to sleep, how to gather information about sleep and heart rate variability. It's about applying them. It's about using that coaching model to be able to apply them, and to be kind and compassionate to ourselves and each other, because we're humans and we're going to fail. We're going to, fall off the wagon, and we're going to get back on. And how do we have friendships and community that hold us, not only to support us along the way, but that can see us in the best vision possible of what we have to give to the world. And I think that what you've been talking about for the past couple of years, frankly, James, has been spot on in that regard. And we tend to want to go back to, well, let me focus on the science, and let me focus on what's the vitamin D dose, or, teach me about how N-acetylcysteine works. And those things are great and important, but it's through community and through the group kind of processes that you've been promoting that I think the greatest way is to be able to truly reinvent medicine.
One of the things that I just totally resonated with what you were doing at the Cleveland Clinic was taking this group visit model away from something that was just a one-off engagement towards like this 10-week process where real friendships were formed. And I would just love to get any insight you have on how do you create friendships in a medical environment, right? How do you stimulate that? And what are some of the ways that all of our practitioners could really be thinking about, I guess, the process of introducing people who want to get healthy to each other and setting that relationship up in the way that it can be the most beneficial for everyone involved?
Um, Excellent question. I really like that. I want to just step back for a moment and kind of share with people like how we got there in the first place. And that was that like we were so busy that we couldn't actually see all the people. And we said, well, we got to do something different. And many people are going to benefit from the basic principles that we have to offer. So you've had on your show, my friend and colleague, Tony Jones, and she came up with the idea. First, we tried to do it in a different way. And then she came up with this idea. I said, that's excellent. Let's go forward with that. And as we began to do that, what we realized is that it's not about being didactic and it's not about being authoritative. It's about offering tools that people have to be able to use in their lives and then helping them to use those tools. So when it's constructed in that way, more as a dialogue rather than as a didactic teaching, it offers the opportunity for people to express what's going on for them to each other, and then they find, wow, you have something useful. It's not just the doctor or the nutritionist or the coach who has something to offer, but Joan across the way, or James or Raphael all have something useful to say here, that I can take into my life. And that really is where the model excels. And certainly as we go back and look, others who have used this group model over time have found very similar things. And so it's creating that, as you said, that friendship and that connection along the way to learn from each other. And that creates community and friendship.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's something special. I think we've all been part of disempowering communities as well. And certainly maybe some of our, communities that we all engage in all the time as humans. So, family and high school and our first jobs may have been even traumatic to be part of as far as being in communities. But ultimately, there's something really special about the community ethos in sort of infected with the functional medicine operating system, right? Where there's something that you're working towards, everyone's working towards towards a sort of a mutually empowering situation.
Yeah. There's one other element that I want to add, that when you asked the question, it came to me immediately, and that's vulnerability. Vulnerability to actually be like, I don't know everything about everything. I'm not the expert. And there are other things that other people can offer that may be of value. And to be able to share my own vulnerability, in the process of getting cancer and sharing that vulnerability, that was a huge lesson for me, because what happened for me was, instead of always being the one who was the doer, the giver, I was receiving. And what I found was that in receiving help from others, it actually brought joy to other people's lives. Like they wanted to be able to offer that to me, and it helped, and it deepened relationships. So that vulnerability piece, and it's uncommon and it's not easy to do, and it's certainly not what we're trained at in medical school, but it's a necessary thing to be able to deepen relationships and connection.
So for the average functional medicine doctor who maybe is watching this, do you think it's a better plan to go down the journey of learning to be a group facilitator, or do you think it's better to build a team with people who already know how to do that, or do you think it could be a bit of both?
Well, I mean, I think it's a bit of both, but I really think that we have to learn how to be able to lead teams, and that there are people who have skill sets, and the ability to do that. And there's also this issue of rank that happens, that if I'm the facilitator of the group and I'm the doctor, people are going to keep deferring to me. And And that's not going to allow for the full expression to occur. I love to do that kind of thing, but there are ways in which I can do that in a cameo role and be able to help support individuals along the way and support the group rather than to be the facilitator. I think that the team orientation is key to being able to do this. And, we've found, I think health coaches are awesome in their ability to do that, and finding the right one and that fits in with the personality of your group and your team. That's essential to do. The nutritionist, finding someone who has a view that's similar to yours. And while in the early phase, you may want to find someone who's more of a hybrid. That's pretty difficult to do. Working with a team and even outsourcing some of those kinds of services, to be able to do that initially as a way that you've got multiple different skill sets that are coming to the table, as well as multiple different personalities.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned that, the skill sets and the personalities, because I think that different personality types can be inspiring to different people within that kind of environment too,
Mhm,
right?
mhm. Exactly. And some patients are going to need that warm and fuzzy comforter, and some people are going to need that more directive in your face, like you need to do this, and it varies for different people at different points in time as well. So how we use our whole team approach to be able to support individuals, that's key.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've I think it's kind of like a broken record here at the Evolution of Medicine that group delivered care can be a significant part of teams moving forward, and I'm glad that that's a part of the reinvention. Where should we go next on this journey of reinvention?
Well, I spoke about the world and what's happening in the world, and I think that we can't sort of start 2021 without really talking about, well, where we're at with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID and what's happening there. So we see these vaccines that are coming out now, these mRNA vaccines, which frankly are have more efficacy than I had thought they would have, and they seem to be pretty interesting and amazing in what they're able to do. But there's a lot that we don't know about them. And so the thing that I want to emphasize to people out there is that what we want to do is we really want to come back to focus on that resilience, to keep that front and center. So whether someone is getting a vaccine and we can optimize their benefit from it, or they're waiting to get a vaccine, or they're choosing not to get a vaccine, for any of those people, what we want to do is we want to look at, well, what are those things in your life in terms of sleep, nutrition, what are supplements, vitamin D, vitamin C, N-acetylcysteine, zinc, quercetin, all of which have been demonstrated to be really helpful for immune resilience. And so in the reinvention of this, we see this as sort of the ground level. But then, I use this metaphor of like, well, everyone's like, oh, okay, well, the vaccines are the answer, and that's the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, we don't know what's going to happen with all the vaccines. We're doing an experiment at this point in time. 30,000 people, were in the clinical trials, of which half got the placebo. And, now we're going to be, administering it to, 30 million people in the next 2 months, and, 150 million people over the course of the year. We're going to see what happens with that. And are there some side effects that we need to be paying attention to? How do we look at this? How do we support people along the way? But what I want to do is I want to actually open up the idea much bigger than that. And that is that, the concept that we're in a tunnel it's a construct that we've limited ourselves. There's so many businesses and so many people who have been able to see life and move through life in a new way. Certainly there are some restrictions on what we can do, but there are many new ways of being able to see the world and work with each other. And I think that the aspects of social connection. I really dislike the term social distancing, because I think physical distancing, that can make some sense, but let's not separate ourselves socially. We're social beings. We need to relate to each other. And so how do we reinvent in this setting to be able to reconnect with each other? That to me is going to be an essential part of the reinvention.
Absolutely. Do you, from your point of view, do you see that that the data on the tools for COVID that come from functional medicine, and you've done a lot of work in the last year to illuminate those tools with the Institute for Functional Medicine and some of those tools. Do you see that catching on in the like allopathic physician world, or is that something that's really going to have to come from the consumer health space?
Yeah, it's that old saying: if the people lead, the leaders will follow. I think it needs to come in that way, because many physicians are too pharmaceutically focused. Everything that we talk about in medicine seems to be pharmaceutically focused. In fact, if we look at the hearings that happened in Congress a couple weeks ago, talking about early treatment of COVID, and the focus is on hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, repurposed drugs. But if we go to the studies that they're doing on ivermectin, for example, well, it's like, well, we give vitamin D and vitamin C and vitamin A and N-acetylcysteine, and it's like, why? It's all the things we've been talking about, and we give 2 doses of ivermectin. Well, in that setting, I don't think that's the only thing that's making a difference, and yet it's what all the conversation is about. So how do we give support to the immune system? And so I feel like there continues to be a relative view within medicine that food, it's okay, but it really doesn't make a big difference. And the environment, well, can't do anything about it anyways. And, supplements, well, that's just giving someone expensive urine and someone's going to make money off of it. But when we look at the data around, like, so let's say vitamin D, or of N-acetylcysteine in clinical trials, it's like they're effective. So because most clinicians don't know how to work with those things, they eschew it. It's like, oh, there's nothing to see here. But when we work with it, and so I think that the people are finding like, wow, this actually makes a difference. So as I said, I think it's going to be, kind of courageous leaders stepping out and talking about the importance of this, even though it gets put down. And, for individuals, and I don't want to even call them patients, they're just the people in our community who are saying, hey, these things really work.
Absolutely. While we're still on the conversation of COVID, is there any difference between the structures, practices, and best laid plans for having resilience in the face of SARS-CoV-2 and helping people who have ongoing symptoms after COVID-2? Are they the same? Like, are we talking about the same principles, or is there some things that are specific to long COVID that practitioners need to know about, given that they're probably going to end up in the functional medicine doctors' offices around the country at one point or another?
Yeah, and I'm seeing more and more people, reaching out to me, asking for help in that domain. Certainly, the issues of, kind of what has been called in the past a myalgic encephalitis and chronic fatigue syndrome and post-viral fatigue, that's been described at least since 1985. I just saw a commentary from Dr. Fauci saying, like, yeah, he's seen these things with many different kinds of infections all the time, but it's really hard to get a handle on, like, what was the trigger that caused it for an individual. Was it Epstein-Barr? Was it some stress? Was it some accident? Was it some other phenomena? Was it an autoimmune disease process? He said it's very different now because we have a single source trigger where everyone is now developing symptoms from that. So what is the cause of it? We don't know yet. When we look at groups like Mount Sinai in New York, who set up a clinic in May around this, but they're looking at it from a siloed perspective. They're looking at the neurological and the psychiatric and the vascular and the pulmonary and the GI and the cardiac. effects of what's going on, and dermatologic and everything else. When I look at it from a functional medicine standpoint of those functions, and I say, seems to me like energy production is underneath this, and there's a relationship between the mitochondria and energy production and the immune system and how they're working together. So what is the trigger there? How do we support the mitochondria? How do we deal with the immune dysfunction that's going on and be able to support that so that we can deal with the oxidants that are slowing down, or as I talk to patients, I say rusting the mechanism of energy production. It's a little factoid, but I love it. It makes so much sense to me. It's that if we have 6 minutes worth of oxygen to produce energy at any given time, we have that's how much ATP we have in reserve is 6 minutes until we need more oxygen to be able to do max. That means that our body is refilling its tank of energy 240 times a day. Now, if you have just a little bit of inefficiency in that process, it's going to affect things. And where's it going to affect first? First, it's going to affect the brain because that uses the most energy. Then it's going to affect the muscles and the heart. Now, we see people who are having fatigue and can't move and are short of breath and had difficulty climbing stairs and having cognitive impairment and psychological, psychiatric issues going on. To me, it's like, okay, so the mitochondria is really essential here. And what do we need to do to be able to bring that back into balance? Now, where the big question is in all of the post-COVID investigation at this point in time is what's driving that? Is it an immune activation that's continuing to cause imbalance and upregulation of inflammatory components? That's not really clear. It is clear that there's immune dysfunction, and it is clear that there is mitochondrial inefficiency that's going on. So those are the two primary foci from a functional medicine perspective to how do we support people in this way. And we're still learning about what are the best tools, but using things like a glutathione and N-acetylcysteine that are going to act as antioxidants, using higher doses of some of these kinds of things that I've talked about for immune resilience are important. And then we'll be investigating, the proponents of other agents are saying, oh, these are things that are going to be effective. We don't have the data on that yet. And so we're going to continue to move forward with a systems biology approach of how the pieces fit together and support patients in that way. And you said something earlier, and I'll just, and I've got a couple patients who have come to me who started having symptoms in, late December and early January. People who were, traveling internationally or in major places like New York City or Disney World, where there were lots of different travelers, and while when I first saw them, I said, no, this doesn't fit the timeline. What we now know is that, it was probably in this country. I think we can say safely it was in this country, sometime in November and December, because we see people have antibodies to it at that point in time already. So it's a bigger issue than we can imagine. And to just put a point on it, one of the reasons why I'm supportive of the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine at this point in time for most people, is that because, and there's a lot that we don't know in terms of potential downstream side effects, but to me, the patients I've seen with long haulers or post-COVID, which seem to comprise about 20% of all patients who get COVID, it's like, that's a huge number. And so in my patients, I'm saying I want to weigh the effect of the vaccine and dealing with potential side effects of that versus the side effects of getting the wild type SARS-CoV-2 virus infection and the sequelae that I've seen from they're significant. They're not minor, they're significant.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting balancing act, and obviously it's a balancing act that it's difficult to know because we don't know the other side of it. But I definitely respect all the thinking that's going on in our community to try and come up with what is the most reasonable course of action moving forward. I think functional medicine is in an amazing position to do that just because of the understanding of systems biology and frankly, decades of treating patients with with Lyme, Epstein-Barr, and other infectious issues that where the symptoms carry on, and perhaps there's been some, so I would say, some exciting possibilities that, just COVID-2 by its nature and the way that it shows up in people after infection is actually going to open up medicine in general to conversations about what infection does in the long term, and not just this infection. And, that continues to paint functional medicine and functional medicine doctors in a great light for just being ahead of the curve and listening and working with patients before it was generally acknowledged inside medicine. I think everyone in our community should be really proud of the fact that we went to bat for patients when no one else would listen in many cases.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's the clinical side of things, and I think those two things that we've shared already, sort of like the different operating system for care. Obviously, thinking about community and social isolation as a big driver of chronic disease outcomes is critical. But then there's the sort of this other side of reinvention of healthcare that really focuses on, like, I would say, sort of like how we fit into medicine and how we sort of how we participate in medicine, and also the technology by which medicine is delivered. Because another huge shift in 2020 was this shift towards a more technologically rich experience. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the reinvention, but also I think one thing that's going to come up for a lot of people is how we maintain the value of in-person medicine when a lot of in-person medicine isn't always possible, and what are some things that we can do to reinvent things that have been part of medicine forever, like the physical exam, in a digital environment.
Well, there's a lot there, James, and I struggle with it, frankly. I had a clinical practice, and I've had Zoom type or calls or Google Meet follow-ups with my patients, but up until this year, I always said, I have to meet you first. You have to come and see me. I have to get a connection to you, and I don't have that opportunity anymore to be able to do that. But I continue to see new patients, and I continue to develop a new set of skills that are around how to be able to connect with an individual. There's more focus on the listening of what's going on. I don't have that same experience of being able to read the nonverbal cues in the same way. And which we know 85% of communication is nonverbal in nature. So it's like learning to be able to cultivate that and to be able to do that. Now, I use a set of tools that I integrate into my EMR, where I'm asking a lot of questions ahead of time. I get a lot of information. Working to develop remote, weights and blood pressure, and, working with someone, on HRV remotely, and things of that nature that I think will be really, really helpful to be able to work with people from a virtual standpoint as we are here. And I don't think that it's a full substitute. I think there are some times where I'm going to want to see someone in person, and cultivating the opportunity to do that and making it safe. And I do that because I see people not only from a Western framework, but also from a shamanic framework. And when I'm seeing them, I want to see them in person, and I sit with them around the fire and connect with what's really going on deeper inside them. I'm sure there are people who have skill sets to be able to do that virtually. I do not. And so it is an important both and in the setting. It's like deepening the toolkit that we have available. When I'm seeing someone on Zoom, I'm having them do some movements. I'm seeing how they can move. They're showing me their skin. I'm trying to do that, but I don't have a way to listen to their heart. I don't have a great way to be able to look in their oropharynx. But a lot of the nutritionally oriented physical exam that's going to allow me to look at the skin, at the nails, at the teeth, at the gums, at what's going on with various muscular movements. I can do all those things virtually, and I do. So that's part of my virtual physical exam, as part of the process, to be able to assess someone.
Yeah, that's really I think we just have to do as much as we can with what we have. Before we get into the last part that I want to talk about, I know there is some, chatter in the functional medicine community that perhaps, for the last decade, I think it's been a reasonable bet to say that if you really want to practice this medicine, you want to be freed of the shackles of the sort of conventional medicine to be able to practice this operating system, then, insurance and functional medicine didn't go that well together. And it does seem that, if we're going to reinvent, and the reinvention is not just going to be in our own little silo of functional medicine, but we're actually going to reinvent the whole thing, right? And have functional medicine as the operating system for the whole thing, which, in my opinion, nothing else but that is an acceptable outcome of the year of reinvention, right? That's where we need to go as far as like really aiming for what we want. It does seem that, and it does seem to me that there are moves afoot with conventional medicine recognizing that, as an example, having doctors play an accountability role for a patient is way too expensive. And perhaps there are non-face-to-face, non-physician roles that could help to provide accountability to the protocol of the doctor. And that should be reimbursed. Or team-based care and the way that, patients and practitioners communicate with a team, should be reimbursed. And it does seem that, medicine is catching up, and perhaps the barriers to entry that exist for doctors to shift into functional medicine that have existed inside the sort of insurance billing piece may be opening up for a full-scale reinvention inside the system.
Certainly the opportunities there, the new E&M codes, evaluation and management codes that have been developed for CPT, or the reinterpretation of them, I think helps to open up the possibility of being able to do that. I think so there are steps along the way. Certainly the reimbursement for telemedicine and virtual visits, that is a Pandora's box that was opened in the end of March, and I don't see any way of being able to close that at this point in time, which is going to actually increase the ability of people to be able to look in different areas other than just what's in their local neighborhood for getting the kind of medical care that they want. And so now we're going to be able to see, more competition in what works for people. But I do think, as you've said, that it's going to be necessary to not just be a concierge fee-for-service package or subscription approach, but actually to embrace the insurance options that are going on. And so, if I can, talk with someone weekly for 15 minutes and charge them for that, and be able to develop a relationship, and then connect them with my team, who are doing other kinds of services that will also be reimbursed, that becomes a great opportunity for a shift. And I think you're right, and it's unfortunate, but I don't think that we can make the shift that we're looking for without actively engaging the insurance reimbursement system, because that's what people are used to for spending their healthcare dollars. And we have to be able to work with that in a more effective way. Now, those are going to be some new models that are reinvented over this year of how to be able to do that, and how to be able to integrate that. Like we figured it out at Cleveland, how to do it in a group model in person. Now, how to do that in a group model with a physician or virtually, that is something that I know that you and your team are working on that, and there are some others out there who are bringing forth new ideas. I look forward to those ideas being shared more broadly, of how we can be able to do group visits on a virtual basis that are insurance reimbursable. And in fact, one of the things about the group visit piece is that it really works best in that insurance reimbursable environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've done a number of experiments in 2020 as to what that could look like, and really trying to zero in on that. And I think it's really exciting just to see what is possible. And if we were looking for sort of like this sort of break in the matrix by which we could deliver this lifestyle first root cause approach to the masses, one of the things that really hit me a couple of years ago was, even if you were able to get your, direct pay business so efficient that it could achieve, a direct primary care membership of $80, $90 a month, there's still this huge population in the country that relies on government care. And ultimately, if we don't get those people better, we're not really going to flatten the curve of healthcare costs. And I think a lot of people care about working with those people. And certainly we see that this kind of high volume group, technologically driven healthcare, is possible to deliver in that way. And even things like remote patient monitoring, is heading us to a world where you're determining people's function, not in their just semi-annual stool test, right? But actually potentially throughout the year, you're able to really understand where their function is. And if we're going to, if functional medicine is going to become medicine, those are things that are helping it to become that way, because ultimately, once everyone starts understanding their own numbers, functional medicine will be the way to improve those numbers. And I'm excited to see that happening in conventional medicine. I think more and more people will become a little bit more agnostic to what tools do the job once they're measuring things in a consistent way. So I'm excited to see that.
I agree with you 100%. And one of the things that I want to, I mentioned earlier, but I want to give a shout out to is I think the ability to be remotely monitoring heart rate variability and being able to see where people are at from a parasympathetic, sympathetic tone process and how they deal with the stressors that are going on in their life. There's a ton of information that will be captured there, and being able to help people real time with seeing how they're imbalanced. I think that's going to be a game breaker, a game changer.
Absolutely. So yeah, the last topic I want to talk about with regard to reinvention is our connection to the natural world. And I saw a video over Christmas actually with Dr. Zach Bush, and he was talking about something that was really resonant to me, which was that, over Christmas time, when families get together, in this year, particularly in the end of 2020, it was a moment where I think a lot of what we thought of as ritual, was kind of exposed as marketing, like historical marketing from companies that, the hallmark Christmas, right, of what Christmas should be and the rituals that are created around that. And his test, or his challenge, was to use this Christmas as an opportunity to recreate new rituals around the natural world and around the world that we want to see rather than the world that it has been. And I just thought that was a really amazing test. I know that this is something, with your work with the indigenous, is very interesting to you and essential to you. And I just, through that same lens, if you look at medicine, you see that a lot of things that we think were the way that they should be because of medicine was actually just marketing or the control of one dominant class of medicine, pharmaceutical driven approaches. And ultimately, it's about creating new rituals around around the natural world. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and what are some opportunities for our practitioners and our greater community to use this sort of moment to, create new rituals that are more in line with natural principles.
I think it's a beautiful expression, and I thank Zach for raising the issue and for being able to put it out there. We continue to see him to be courageous in his approach to take these new ideas and be outside the box. I don't think Zach thinks there is a box, and I want to echo that, and seeing that it's not just about the connections in the natural world. That is very important. It's also the connections with each other, with community, with family, with friends, and being able to move in that way. That becomes, where the opportunity is. And so during this holiday season, being able to be together and deeply connect, not focusing on something external around exchange of gifts or exchange of, some monetary possession, but exchange of, what's really going on in your lives, what's important, what have you learned, what are the things that you have gratitude for, what are the things that, are the stem, the thorn and the rose in your life, and being able to meet with each individual or talk with each person in your family and your friends to be able to really deepen that connection with them. And again, it comes back to that vulnerability piece. And then also, being able to do that. And one way, we've had, people are like, oh, well, we can't be together. It's like, well, hey, we can be outside outside. Let's go outside and be together, and we can walk and we can talk and we can, be connecting to the natural world. I almost want to turn my camera around here and show the winter wonderland. We got 6 inches of snow on Christmas morning. It's so beautiful to be able to just be, living in the mountains here in Western North Carolina and have just this magical expression of the world be right there with us, and to be able to hold us, over this period of time. And, I think that finding ways to be able to deepen our connections and relationships, and we can use rituals, and we can also just use time where we settle down. A ritual that's a simple ritual that would make a ton of difference in many people's lives is to sit down and eat together, have a meal together. And when you do that, take your smartphone and have it not be on the table and not under the table and not in your pocket, but over someplace else where the only focus is on being with each other. And those are tools that are approaches that my 20-year-old sons in their 20s have taught me, because I get fixed on having the phone. Oh, what if something happens? It's like, it's okay, we'll eat dinner and you can check it out afterwards if there's something that you need to do. So I think the addiction aspect as it relates to our phones and our electronics is an important thing for us also to be able to let go of, to be in relationship with each other and to be out in the world. I see people walking around outside, and they've got their phone right in front of them, and they're not looking around and seeing what's happening in the beauty of the world, of all of the energy that's present around them that helps in the healing process, is necessary for the healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if more than anything, I feel like all the things that we've been hearing about in the functional medicine community for the last few decades should give us all firm footing. We have the firmest footing in medicine for what's needed to take us where we want to go. And I think, sometimes it can feel like things were moving underneath us, even early on in COVID, where talking about the things that we knew boosted immune resilience or created immune resilience, we're being sort of shut down. And now here we are 9 months later, and we see that, okay, the world is coming round to the fact. And so just for all of us to feel a confidence in the sureness of our footing. And I really just want to acknowledge, yourself and all the other leaders that have been sort of, I think giving everyone in our community this sureness of footing. And ultimately, I'm very excited about this year of reinvention. I see great things being possible for our community and our integration into the community at large. And thank you for your time here today and for setting up such an incredible starting point for this year of reinvention.
Well, thank you so much, James. And I think that you've highlighted, that there is a lot of fear in the world, and COVID has unmasked the fear. Some people might even call it the virus of fear. But that what is necessary for us to do is that fear actually is the opportunity to be able to express courage. Courage arises in the setting of fear. It doesn't arise outside of that. So how do we have the courage to hold to this vision, that we see, and there's not arrogance or hubris in it. It's just that, like, this makes sense and it works. And so let's be courageous in holding to this vision to reinvent ourselves as we move through 2021 to be of benefit to our people.
Beautiful. Dr. Patrick Hanaway, thank you so much for being part of the evolution of medicine. This is the year of reinvention. Buckle up, because it's going to be a great year for our community and for medicine as a whole. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.